right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another podcast here on the Online Bible Institute Network. And this is Pastor Steve. I'm going to be doing this one by myself today. Pastor Douglas is out of town, and he'll be back for next week. And Pastor Brain is also away. So he'll be back with us next week, too, hopefully. So I'm going to work through this podcast with you where we sort of talk about what's coming up on the next weekend at Keys Vineyard Church. And we're continuing on in our series, Kingdom Tension. This will be part number 14 this week. And we're going to, the overall idea is the power and the love of God, but we'll be using a passage out of Ephesians to sort of base that, and then some stories in Acts. But in Ephesians 3:14, let me go ahead and read this to you. Powerful, wonderful passage. For this reason, I kneel before the Father, from whom his whole family in heaven and on earth derive its name. And I pray that out of his glorious riches, he may strengthen you with power through his Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. And I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power, together with all the saints, to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ, and to know this love that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled to the measure of all the fullness of God. So we're building on the series. We're talking about the church, and that's us, individually and corporately as people. We're the church. Not church isn't just something that we do. It's who we actually are. And we talked about being the temple last week, built on the foundation of the apostles and the prophets. Jesus is the cornerstone. And we sort of ended last week really talking about how we are the portable presence of the Lord, because Holy Spirit lives in us. We're a heaven and earth connection. Wherever we go, we're bringing Jesus with us, and so we're people of mission. And we're to act like that, right, in the world. How do we make a difference in the world, bringing Jesus into this situation, loving people, showing grace, showing mercy, all those things? And yet the challenge is, when we do those things, and you guys this, we often face resistance. I often call that pushback. The enemy pushes back when we really move into the life that we're called to. There's often things that happen, and when these things happen, what we have to do is really make sure we're hanging on to the love of God and the power of God in a very real way, because the whole thing behind pushback is to get you to stop. If he can quiet you and silence you, then he wins. And the story we'll sort of look at is in Acts 19. And Paul has been sort of telling the believers, how amazing God is, and they're listening, and a lot of people are in Ephesus. He's in Ephesus. A lot of people are coming to Jesus, and they're walking away from their little g gods, lots of religion, if you would, in Ephesus, lots of belief in these little g gods, and people are coming to the real God through Christ, and they're moving away, but they still have the idea that sort of in their outlook on things, and it's pretty normal, is that if you're doing what your God wants you to do, then life ought to be going the right way. And that's what they certainly believed when they were following their false gods. And now that they've sort of given their life to this one God, the real God, the big G God, they sort of are still expecting that he's going to do, if they do what they think they're supposed to do, he's going to do what they think he's supposed to do. And so they burned their books and everything, and they're following it. All of a sudden, they hear that Paul, who represents this God, is in prison, and they're like, "Well, how is that even possible? Because he's God." What? So they begin to have some pretty serious questions, and Paul has to sort of let them know that, look, it's fallen world, broken planet, and when we're out doing the things that we should do, we still are going to have some struggles and difficulties in our lives. But we can't let that discourage us and stop us from being what we're called to be. And so that's kind of the idea, is like, don't let pushback that you sort of endure persecution even discourage you. This still has to do with, we're still, even though we found the way in Jesus, back from exile, we still are dealing with exile in a lot of ways. I've just been reading recently again in the book of Daniel. And now Daniel and his friend Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they're in exile and they're dealing with the fallout of exile, even though they're doing and moving in and choosing the Lord in all this time. There's still a lot of things that happen. You get tossed into a hot pit and a lion's den, and there's a lot of stuff going. Now he's watching out for them, but they're still going through these things, and it would be very easy to get discouraged. And so when Paul reaches back to the people in Ephesus in a letter, he says, "Don't be discouraged because of my sufferings for you, which are to your glory." He's saying, "Look, don't let these things that discourage you. It's just part of doing what we're called to do in a fallen world. There's going to be frustration and pushback and persecution. It's unfortunately all part of the deal." But then he's going to begin to talk about the power of God. And the big deal about the power of God is that what God does in those things. The word is actually dunamis, and it's this incredible word. It's capable power, and the only way I can think of it is like many of us are sort of watch movies and are acquainted with like superheroes and those things. Superman and Superman's superpower, at least one of them is he can fly, right? And you got Batman, and he can't fly. His superpower is kind of that he's rich, right? And you got Flash, it's another one. He's really fast. He can't fly. Their power is kind of limited to the things that it can do. And then what Paul is saying is that the power of God is capable of doing something amazing in your life, and that's showing you how amazing the love of Christ is. Listen, verse 17. Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith, and I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power. Have this power together with all the saints to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ, and to know this love that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled to the measure of the fullness of God. There's the power of God, the dunamis of God, the power that raised Jesus from the dead, that you would have access to the power in order to know how amazing this love is that God has for us. Because when we can hang on to that, that will see us through any of the difficulties that we go through in life. And then to remember that God is able. God is able to do things that we can't imagine. Oftentimes in difficult situations, we can only see one way out. And we, if it's not going that way, we think we're done or whatever. And yet God is able to work with a whole range of things that we can't even imagine. And we have to know that. And when you know and you can settle in the love that he has for you, you can begin to trust him to work into situations in ways that you may not normally be able to figure out. I was thinking in that line about Joseph, because we briefly mentioned that family sort of situation last week in the message as we were talking about Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, and how Jacob had to go to Egypt and Joseph was there, and how in that story, lots of bad things happened to Joseph. But ultimately, he says in Genesis 50, 20, to his brothers who had, threatened to kill him and thrown him in and sold him to slavery, "As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it or can use it for good in order to bring it about is this day to save many people alive." God can work in situations that we don't even begin to understand, and yet can ultimately turn them around and use them to do amazing things. And so for us, it's learning to settle and trust in the power and the love of God and know how amazing it really is. So that's where we're going to be heading this week as we continue on in this series, and how all those things really begin to help us be the church. And that's what these are the tools that Paul is giving us. And we sort of been focusing here on Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, and Colossians. He's giving us these amazing tools and to be the church individually and corporately, and to be people on mission and in mission and of mission, loving the world around us and demonstrating the love of God to them. So we'll be looking at that this week. That's what I've got for you today. And I hope that sort of gets you excited for the weekend, and that we'll see you either at church, or hopefully you'll see us online. But it's been great spending this time with you, and look forward to doing it again soon. All right. God bless you.